Get started. For those of you I don't know and haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, I'm Don Shalaro. I'm with the Foundation for Supply Chain Solutions. If you've accessed this forum through your desktop, you'll see up on your screen an area on our website that we created quite some time ago, in March or so, to devote to resources for COVID-19. It actually started out way down here at the bottom with some materials that Kerry Corporation shared with us, and we continued to build on this with input and resources from a variety of our member companies, from OSHA and the CDC, and continue to update that. So if you're looking for something, feel free to visit our website. If you don't see what you're looking for there, there's a lot of resources out there through other industry associations you may belong to in your various states where you have locations. The last time we met, we put up information about what some of the states are doing in terms of reopening. So you can take a look at those. If you've missed any of our previous forums, we do have recordings up here and have labeled them as best we could for the content, and attaching some of the resources we shared during those forums and making them available here up at the top and then throughout the content of this page. So if you have something to share, please pass it along. If you have something you'd like us to look into, feel free to share that as well. Today, we have the pleasure of having a variety of presenters with us. Before we get to that, I do want to invite our co-sponsor, which is the Association for Contract Packagers and Manufacturers, to say a few words. We've done a couple of programs with Ron and his group, and we're excited to have this event with him today. So I will be turning it over to Ron Puvak from the CPA. Ron?
Thanks, Don. I appreciate it. And thank everybody for being on the session today. I think you'll find it very interesting. Don, next slide, please. Just a small, take just a minute or two just to give you a background perspective. Contract Package Association, been around since 1992. We are the Association of Contract Packagers, Contract Manufacturers. Our whole focus is to promote the industry, generate business. Next slide, Don. We have several ways of doing an education webinar like we are today. This session today is part of our mission. A lot of trade shows where we go out and promote the industry in general and generate business for our members. Networking with our annual meeting and PAC Expo and a few other events. And also, what's more important is the RFQ. We have an RFQ on our site, request for quotation, and anybody can use it, and the results go out to our members. If you'd like to learn more about us and what we do, please visit us. That's our website down there. And Dawn, that's enough. Let's turn it back and let's get started.
Thank you, Ron. Well, we have, this was an idea that actually Ron brought to us through his work with Nulogy, and we're very fortunate. Nulogy is one of our good partners as well. And so we were happy to participate in this worthwhile event. So we are going to, I'm going to put up some information, and then I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Mehran Malik, Vice President Client Services with Nulogy.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dawn and Ron and the F4SS and CPA organizations for inviting us and a bunch of our business partners and customers to the event. For those who do not know me, my name is Mehran Malik, and I head up the client services team at Nulogy. We're a software and services organization servicing the fast-moving consumer goods industry, co-packers, co-mans, as well as brands. And my responsibilities are very much customer facing and customer related. So onboarding our customers, supporting them, managing the customer success team, and educating them. So thank you for the introduction. Today, with our partners that we have on the line, I actually don't see one of them. Doug might be running a bit late, but we have Kim Egan from GH Manufacturing, Greg Wren from Ameripac, and Steve Light from Excel. I'll let them do a brief introduction before I pass it over. and then start the panel with some questions. Thank you, all of you, for coming. With respect to housekeeping, if you're not a panelist, I ask that you please keep your microphone muted to minimize disruptions. We will take questions and we'll be monitoring them throughout the panel. So if you want to go in the chat, ask the whole group. I'll be keeping an eye out there and including them in the questions that we have. If there are questions for specific panelists, please call those out as well. If you wish, turn off your videos if you're not a panelist. We don't expect you to keep them on, but if you want to keep them on, please do as well. For the panelists, keep your mics unmuted once we start to minimize the disruptions of unmuting and so forth. So let's get into the panel. I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction. I think with all of us being familiar with co-pack and co-man, we know that the inherent nature of the space is based on agility. With SKU proliferation, short runs, and seasonal demand, we all need to be agile to adjust to the changing needs and demands of the market. However, the overall supply chain isn't as prepared or as agile as we are. For those who've been reading some articles, there's a number out there that talk about how the supply chain is built to be efficient, and when you build efficiency, you ultimately take away some of the resiliency and ability to manage shocks to the system. So very curious in this panel to go down a discussion topic and cover a number of items that talk about this balance that we always play. Since the start of the first wave of COVID, and speaking to the panelists beforehand, we've all learned a lot. Everything from the difficulty of planning due to bullwhip effects, managing imported supplies on the supply side, for example. On the demand side, hoarding of household items such as toilet paper and cleaning supplies. But also the importance of regular sanitation and cleaning, social distancing on the line, the importance of barriers such as plexiglass, shower curtains, so forth. And then finally, also the importance of contact tracing for our staff. So for this panel, we don't want to focus too much on what we've done in the past, but we are instead going to talk about what we're doing to plan for the future. What coming out of wave one can be used in the future for wave two? What long-standing impact will it have to our supply chain? And let's be honest a little bit as well. What did we mess up for wave one? What were we unprepared for? Even as a software provider that prides ourselves on ability to work remotely and everyone having laptops, there were learnings to adjusting to wave one, and I really want to hear from the panelists around this as well. So I will try to wrap the conversation around the three kind of pillars of people, process, and technology. People being the human element of managing our staff and our labor, and obviously the emotions and communications that come with the situation that we're in. Process, such as the flow of bringing in staff, temperature checks, process on the line, and so forth. And then technology, services and tools such as Nulogies and others that you've used throughout this time. And let's not just focus within our four walls, but also with our vendors and our customers in the larger supply chain. So with that being said, if we can maybe start with some brief introductions from our panelists. Kim, I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, to go first with a few sentences about yourself and GH Manufacturing.
Great, thanks a lot, Moran. My name's Kim Egan. I'm the CFO, Executive Vice President and CFO of GH Manufacturing. We are located in Canada, and we've been a Nulogy customer since 2009. We do co-packing, but we also have a converting polyethylene wicketing bag operation, which we also run over the Nulogy software. So thanks very much for having me.
Thanks, Kim. Steve, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Great to be with you all. And thanks to the Nulogy team for the invite to participate. We've been a Nulogy client for several years now and use it in a kitting, co-packing, manufacturing type of environment. I joined the company 7 months ago as the president and one of the partners. And prior to that, spent the last 6 years as a senior executive in the healthcare industry at Cardinal Health, one of the top 25 public companies in the United States.
All right, thank you, Stephen. Greg, do you mind saying a few words?
Absolutely. Yeah, good to see everybody here. Thanks for having me. I'm Greg Wren. I'm the owner and CEO here at Ameripac. We have locations here in Dallas, Texas, and also a location in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. We've been a Nulogy customer since about 2017. has changed our business significantly, just as something like a COVID-19 has changed it as well. But yeah, we look forward to seeing how everybody else is handling this and how we can help give you some of the ways that we've been able to use this. Definitely.
All right, thank you, Greg. So there's a little feedback there. I'm not sure if it was when you came in or closer or not. Do you mind just maybe saying another sentence, just so we can do a sound check?
Sure. No, I hope it's better. I'm using a little bit of a different speaker here, so I hope that's better.
That's much better. Thank you so much, Greg, and thank you for that introduction there too. All right, so let's hop into the panel and some questions we have. And Greg, maybe if you can continue, how prepared do you feel you and AmeriPac were for a pandemic such as this? And maybe in a few sentences, what worked, what didn't, and what do you feel still needs to be figured out?
Sure. No, I think we were mildly prepared for something like this. I don't think it ever came across anybody's mind that we would need to deal something to this extent where our ability to move around the country, move around the city was going to be minimized, if not stopped. So with us being an FDA facility, obviously from a cleanliness and organization within the facility, we felt like we were already kind of at the top of that level there. But when you start looking at the separation of employees and the touch in the surfaces we touch on a daily basis, whether it's restrooms, equipment, conveyors, anything like that, I think we were a little bit taken aback by it. So for us, we immediately changed a lot of our daily, sometimes hourly cleaning protocols and implemented those as quickly as possible, as well as the social distancing. So long story short, I think we were probably, if you had to look at the numbers, we were probably about 20% of the way prepared for something like this. And then I think our team did a great job of responding to that and getting us to about 90% prepared within about 3-4 days.
Sounds good. Thanks for that, Greg. And I think as this conversation goes on, I'd be curious to know what will take us from the 90 to the 100% for you guys. And I'll ask those questions as we go along. Thanks, Greg.
You bet.
Steve, yeah, Steve, I'm gonna ask a question to you. Same question, but I do understand that Excel has a very unique situation with your staffing. And if you don't mind, touch on it a little bit with the same question, but also share with us the unique layout that you have with your staffing team and your business park too. Oh, you're muted, Steve. Steve, you're muted.
Yep, there you go. Thanks. Always forget. Now, we operate in Columbus, Ohio, in about a 520,000 square foot facility. And what makes us somewhat unique to other co-pack, co-man out there is about 12 years ago, we created our own temp labor service. And there are about 19 other manufacturers in the park that we're in. And we supply labor to about 18 of the 20, including ourselves. So even coming into COVID, there was a lot of a challenge. We were hearing about co-packers around the country struggling with labor because of the strong labor market. We never really felt that. The other thing is that we've got a very diverse labor force. We've got over 22 nationalities represented in 18 languages. Surprisingly enough, both those factors were really helpful because I agree with Greg. I'd say we were about 25% ready being an FDA facility like them with the manufacturing and quality environment we run. But we were, I think, helped by the fact that we had our own labor force and we've got such a diverse labor force because right away, I think we started to put efforts in place about 4 weeks in advance of what I would say was the general trend in the country. And a big part of what we had to think about was how to be effective in communicating to people, both what needed to happen and how to really protect themselves and their teams. And the nice thing about it is we were able to really navigate this. We were an essential business operating 3 shifts a day, 5 and 6 days a week, because most of our clients are clients in food packaging, nutritional product, or out the door with product like antibacterial. And so it was very keen on us to pretty rapidly deploy a series of steps. But in doing so, we've had a near zero incident rate of COVID in our building for the last 4 months, despite having hundreds of people in and out of the building every day. And I think a lot of it was because we had a good foundation and we've got a core of people that we've got to be very thoughtful about how to be effective in communicating and collaborating on the production floor every day to really have the highest quality standards.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. While we're on the topic of people, Kim, I'll maybe pose this question to you. the discussions I had with you and everyone else on this panel, there's a lot of talk about communications with our people and our staff, managing anything from misinformation to making them confident and secure enough to come in. I know that in Belleville, the community that you have is actually quite unique, having been there a couple of times. It really is like a small family. I don't want to use the word insulated. It definitely isn't insulated, but it does seem like a different kind of layout than I've normally seen. How did you manage the communications and potentially the misinformation, but also knowing that new information was coming in and day out as the situation progressed?
Yeah, so I'd start by echoing the comments of the other two panelists for sure. And I think our uniqueness was really around the leadership. So our president and owner was, he's in his 80s, but he was into work every day, and he was really the example of, common sense and remaining calm, and that kind of emanated throughout the team. So our leadership were able to address people with humility. They were able to, show empathy, understanding, but also present a common sense approach, which, you're right, Moran, given all the information that was flowing around, was really a noisy time. And that kind of level of calmness really helped us thrive and create an atmosphere where people could come into work, could feel safe, could feel like they could trust the information that they were being given, and could dispel a lot of the, Facebook posts and other posts. And, we just really kept the communication open and tried to address everybody's concerns as valid, but also providing them with as much true information as we could. And that came right from the top. So I would say that was really a unique part. And also we were in a community which was, I think we had maybe 43 cases in total, and maybe 2 or 3 deaths, but really it's a smaller community, smaller sense. So it was, for us, that communication though was really, really key.
That's good. Thank you, Kim. And in speaking to you, Steve, I think you had shared something around 20-something nationalities, 18 languages, and you guys had customized a number of communications across more than a handful of those languages. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, a couple things. One, I would build on Kim's point about, really starting from the top down. Our CEO took responsibility from the get-go to lead the initiative, and he was pretty much every day on the phone with outside counsel, making sure we understood the guidance at the state and federal level, what the rights and needs were for your employees and how to protect them. And we were communicating that regularly through the organization. To your point, we did a couple things because of the diversity in our organization and the different backgrounds. We were making sure that all of the written communication was in over 5 languages in the building to make sure, and it was at all the key spots, whether it was check-in area, break rooms, bathrooms, on the line. We were reinforcing what safety and prevention looked like, and also encouraging people that if they were seeing any of these kinds of symptoms, to really step up, connect with their manager, connect with HR, so that we could proactively work with that. And we've got a lot of positive response from that. And then the other thing was right away using some of the most basic preventive measures, every day handing out masks, handing out eyewear, putting plexiglass up wherever we could. They saw the team sanitizing the building 2 to 3 times a shift in key areas. And I'll tell you, one of the easiest ones, I've changed my lifestyle tremendously. My mom's proud of me now how much I wash my hands compared to when I was a kid. But we literally littered the building with gel and foam dispensers, both in the production environment, shipping and receiving, as well as the corporate office. And so, and the social distancing, even when we're having meetings today, I'm in my office closed, but if I were out of here, we'd be using masks. And I think part of it is from the very top, echoing and demonstrating those kinds of steps, which just reinforce culturally what's important, and everybody followed along. And as I said, we've been really pleased that we have, near virtual 0 incident rate over the course of this pandemic.
Great, thank you, Steve. And I'm sure your mom is proud. Right now, I'm having that issue with my kids. Even with a pandemic and the worry of their grandparents, they still in and out in less than 3 seconds, not 30.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of kind of leading from the front, I think both of you talked about your CEOs and presidents really leading from the front and leading by example. Greg, I think I've shared this story at Exchange before, but one thing that caught me with you when we did our original implementation was you're really at the front of our implementation. This is well before the pandemic, trying to figure out troubleshooting issues of basic things that normally might be delegated, but I truly saw the importance that you put in understanding things, leading from the front and so forth. Do you want to share any additional thoughts that Steve and Kim, to what Steve and Kim had said on that?
Maybe just a little bit. I completely agree with Steve and Kim on, how it's communicated and how we worked through the initial kind of steps 1 through 5 of how do we operate and how do we protect our employees, not only from the front office, but all the way through the production areas and into the distribution center. So, how we communicated that to the team, what sense of safety and preparedness we could convey to them, and how exactly we were going to go about preventing the spread of the disease throughout the facility was key for us. My president, Tony Rolfe, was a big part of that. We worked together closely on doing as much research as we could possibly do, trying to decipher what information was true, to Kim's point, what was true, what was not true. Also just basically finding out to make sure that we as a company qualified under the essential business registration. So are we actually allowed to be open based on the products that we produce and we distribute? Luckily, that was a pretty quick and easy decision to make, and we found what we needed to find, but then communicating that to our employees and being able to put that into written form. So we actually distributed a memo for every employee in the building for them to carry with them. When you have shelter in place orders, you're, depending on when you're leaving the office, what shift you're on, you could get pulled over for whatever reason just because you're on the street. So having that letter signed by me was essential. And that's how, back to the communication, how do we make sure we can get our employees even to the building, then into the building safely, protected throughout the day, and then back to their families at night, and make sure that nothing we've done has impacted their families, the extended families. So that was it was very, very high on our list, and we did that from the top down. And we never shut down one day, and I was here every day, and Tony, our president, was here every day. It's important to show that sense of team and sense of unity, and that, I didn't disappear, or any CEO disappears for 3 months because we don't want to come to the office. No, we're part of the team. We want to be here. We want to help. We want to protect.
I appreciate that, Greg. And I've heard very similar stories across the Copac base. It's a bit of a sense of pride knowing that our partners and business partners all were able to continue operating. Meanwhile, an organization like Amazon, who has done many great things in terms of efficiencies in the supply chain, their prime delivery rate of 2 days is still, I don't know what it is in your regions, but it's still 6 weeks for some stuff here. So the fact that from a Copac level, what many of you told me is, at worst, you guys hit 70 or 80% efficiency as you got adjusted, and then everyone's been back to a higher level of efficiency, obviously with the focus on the people, the value of the essential business, and making sure people are safe. Greg, I'm going to stay with you for a second, and I'm going to ask maybe a forward-looking question here. What changes have you implemented to manage a potential wave 2? And I know earlier I talked about people, process, and technology. If you don't mind, can you focus maybe on the technology piece? What changes have you made on the technology piece? And I know it all blends together, so share your thoughts, please.
Sure. So we caught a little bit of a break. We were actually in the process of changing our systems and how we use our IT, the IT side of our business, and how we operate within the office. Then also now having multiple locations, how do we have our employees communicate and work in our system, whether they're in Pennsylvania or Texas or around the Metroplex here. So we got lucky in the fact that we had just distributed all new laptops to our employees, our front office employees who need to be in the system. So that, like I said, was great timing. But then having Nulogy be able to accept the increase in demand. So we have some of our products that, because they are in the personal care industry. Things like hair color, things like when the salons and the barbershops are closed, it's amazing how much people want to, keep their look. And so we saw about a 300% increase in those types of products. So having, a system like Nulogy to be able to scale and just continue on, not really have any system impact was crucial for us. So then when you get back to the ability to do Zoom meetings, Microsoft Teams meeting, whatever you needed to from a laptop standpoint, but then have a cloud-based system that even if you didn't or couldn't get on the system, you could at least get to any web browser and continue to do business remotely if needed. So I think IT was a huge part of that. And luckily we were right in the process of getting that solved.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Steve, I see a lot of nodding there. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that a great explanation that Greg gave, and we saw a little bit of the shift ourselves. And with a 25-year history as a company, it has always been kind of boots on the ground in the building. And so the very idea culturally of having to allow people to work remotely from home, not only what technology was required, but also understanding to be a little bit more fluid in the way we used to do things and the way we need to do things. And we came out of it in a very strong side of the equation because people stepped up, they were responsible, they were effective at working at home. And it really put the human element back to leading people that, with schools down, with some of the challenges for moms and dads, you need to remember that people have a life outside of the building. And so we were able to accommodate the customer, the company, and our teammates through the use of technology. The other thing is you ask about where the, how you might handle the next level. We feel really good about the four walls, but clearly we're not isolated and we're not a world unto ourselves. We've got inbound materials coming in and outbound going in all the time across different industries. So we've been spending a bit of time looking at what kind of scanners and other types of product we might use for dealing with viruses, bacteria, fungus for coming in and coming out that I think far exceed anything that we would see in an SQF or a GFSI or an FDA requirement. But really asking that question, do we need to have some preventative and detective measures when stuff comes in on something like this where we can isolate it, really sanitize it, and then take it into production or take it on the road. So I'd say that's really kind of next gen for us to be thinking of from a technology standpoint.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that and the technology piece. Steve, if I can maybe stick with you for a second, because of your unique situation with your staffing agency, is there anything on the people side? It did sound when we talked like you guys were kind of well prepared to some of these shocks in the system. There's some resiliency built in how you manage your staffing. Is there any further changes that the larger organization is going to make in preparation for whether it's wave 2 or just indefinitely because these pandemics could hit again?
Yeah, we've thought long and hard about that, and because we really didn't see those shortfalls in labor, did we get lucky or did we just plan well? Probably a little bit of both, but we feel really good about that. If we have a second wave, we're well positioned for it because of the numerous things that we put in place. So simple answer is we think we're in pretty good shape right now, and that sounds a little bit like fool's logic. We probably need to think about it a little bit more, yeah, I think we're in a good position relative to both physical labor in the building and protecting and preventing based on where we're at today.
Interesting. Yeah, I appreciate that you say you think you're in a good place, but you're not sure either, right? It's very hard to do a fire drill around situations like these. There's so many factors and influencing pieces, right?
Yeah, and I would just add this briefly, but I think part of it wasn't a one and done. Greg talked about being in the building every day. We're out, I'm sure just like Greg is, we're out on the shop floor talking to people, getting feedback. We've got we run Lean Six Sigma operations in the building. So we've got our QA people putting eyeballs on it. And I think what ended up happening that was really instructive is as we're doing our day-to-day management meetings, a part of it was carved out to talk about what's working, where might there be some gaps, and we were evolving in those first few weeks, and even today still asking those questions. I think the biggest thing that I would suggest for people that may be just starting to fire back up or needs to take a hard look at their protective infrastructure is lean on some of your clients. We had calls with, we've got quite a few Fortune 500 in like I said, in the food and healthcare and nutrition business. And we were on the call with their compliance and their safety people talking about what were they seeing in the industry, what were best practices, were there things that we could draft off and take advantage of. So I think if you keep the dialogue going about are there further things we can learn from, and really drawing on the resources around you like your clients, I think it creates a litany of opportunities to keep incrementally getting better every day as you move along.
Great, thank you, Steve. And I think that's a really good segue to one of the other topics I wanted to discuss here. Kim, I'll start with you on this one. And it goes back to the whole piece I had mentioned about the struggle between efficiency and resilience. What changes do you think need to be made in the FMCG space to build some more of that resilience? And maybe start with what already exists in the co-pack space that actually has a little bit of resilience. I know you've traditionally had a very strong relationship with one of the major CPGs that you work with. So curious about your thoughts around this, but also if you've had any conversations, like Steve has said, with them to kind of prepare and plan for the future.
Yeah, that's a great question, Moran. And actually, we are fortunate. We work with a really good global CPG, and they were immediately in touch with us and providing templates and whatever assistance we would need. And that's really, for a small, like I'll just call us a smaller co-packer, it was so important because, I would say in filling out the templates, I could be proud that we were probably there in 90% of the things, but, it was putting it into a format that we could use in the future, and certainly gave some thought-provoking pieces as well that we wouldn't have come up to on our own because they are global and they just have, all these resources we don't have. So I would say that was really important in terms of helping us to prepare for phase 1 and even for phase 2. There's still questions in that pandemic preparedness report that I couldn't answer right away, and we've had to put a lot of thought. We've also engaged our Joint Health and Safety Committee, and again, it's management leading the conversation and pushing to show that, whether it's COVID or it's something else, while we had GMPs in place, we found out quite early actually that our hot water tank wasn't large enough. So obviously, the hand washing became much more improved, which it's an interesting finding, right? And it's honest, and but we right away went out and, got the plumber, got the tank that we needed, and realized that, we were doing a good job, but we weren't doing a great job. So it's helped us really to put that in, and for the future, whether it be COVID or anything else, I feel like we're in a much better, more prepared space. And I think I'd echo that, while we think we are, we know we still have a lot of work to do, but we're certainly much further than we were a few months ago.
Thank you, Kim. It's interesting coming into this conversation when I was looking at questions I'd ask around what changes that you made to prepare for wave 2 and frame it in people, process, and technology. I didn't realize a hot water tank would fall under the technology piece, but you don't know these things, right? So no. It's interesting. But
Marianne, I just wanted to add, when you talk about technology, one of the things that we found in the first few days was that our customer came back to us with a whole myriad of changes, and it was like overnight. And I would say if we hadn't had the Nulogy system and the ability to respond so quickly, like we had within hours, we had the answers that they needed. And I think that's really integral for the fact that we use, every facet of the Nulogy program, but it made the answers there, and it made them quick and easy. And it was more, choosing your staffing was more difficult than answering the customer's questions. So just around the technology piece, I'd add that.
Thank you. And I was going to ask you the question, which you basically answered it. Do you have any specific examples that you want to share around that, around how you were able to get either information out of Nulogy or respond more quickly? Do you have any specific things you want to touch on for that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the customer gave us a forecast literally the next day, and the forecast was completely upside down and backwards. And we cut staffing from, I'm going to say 80 to 20. And we had to do it literally like overnight. We weren't going to get the materials that we needed to produce, and we had to shift and change. And I'm proud of our team. We did it really quickly. And like I said, the staffing was the hardest piece of choosing who, we did ask for volunteers, people who would like to be off or were feeling unsecure or had family issues. We gave them the opportunity sort of to volunteer first. And then it really did help us to have a smaller team for a couple weeks while we all worked out the issues to get back on our feet and get back to 100%, which after a couple weeks, we were ready to, resume back to probably 80% production needs, and then a couple weeks later back to 100%. So, but that kind of breath let us do that. But I couldn't imagine if we were using the old systems we had prior to Nulogy. It would have taken us, days to do what we did.
Yeah, a lot has changed over the past decade. You guys, I think, went live fall of 2009, right? So it's
right,
been 11 years of experience and so forth. So
yeah.
Great. I'm going to ask a question to anyone who wants to answer it in terms of the panel, and this is around automation. I think Copac and Coman has always had less automation than other places of the supply chain. And challenge me if I'm wrong on this. I know, Steve, you guys have built out some automation in a number of things you do there. But I'm wondering, where do you folks think this is going from an automation standpoint, and whether social distancing and staffing, I don't want to say shortages, because shortages definitely have happened, but you know what, I'll cut it at that. With respect to social distancing, potential staffing issues, and volatility in the supply chain, where do you see automation going in the Coman and Copac space?
I can jump on that, Aaron.
Yeah.
I know for us, when you look at how your facility is laid out and what is your manufacturing, your production lines, how do they operate on a shift by shift basis? I think when you look at automation and capital investments in what you're trying to accomplish long term, you have to really look at those two things and say, okay, if we try to social distance, part of the co-packing world, as I'm sure everybody sees, is the fact that you usually you're in close quarters around pieces of equipment, whether that's shrink wrapping, blister packaging, hand packing, kitting, and even in the pick and pack side of the business. So when you look at automation, okay, what existing equipment do you have? What have you been looking at over the last few years that maybe was a little bit capital prohibitive at the time? You now look at, okay, well, what if we did have a drop off in employees on a daily basis? Can we still get the same output with less people? But then in addition to that, can we spread out those pieces in production? And maybe instead of a 5-foot conveyor, we have a 10-foot conveyor taking product from the end of a machine to a different pack out area. Maybe we need a more automated piece of equipment that only requires an operator instead of 2 hand feeders to that piece of equipment. I think it's crucial when you start looking at not only how you improve your overall business efficiency, but then when labor is at a shortage, how can you still get the same output? But if you have the labor available, how can you spread them out far enough without killing your overall efficiency? If you have to shut down a machine that's next to another one, your efficiency is very obvious. You just cut your efficiency in half. It's pretty simple math. So if we can get some automation, get a few different pieces of equipment to allow for that separation, I think it just makes us stronger as a company overall. So that's one of the things that we didn't really look at. Maybe been putting off a few things, but it's one of those things where we don't know what we don't know. And now we're figuring out what we don't know. And then how do we solve it?
And is this the type of thing you wade into slowly, or where do you go for resources and trying this out to see how it goes? Because capital equipment is very expensive, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it depends on what you do. Okay. It's one of those things you look at, what's the most bang for your buck, basically. Okay. What can solve how do we tackle the low hanging fruit? You know, do we have a more concentrated area of people on the pack out? So the end part of the line. So do we get longer conveyors? Do we maybe split where a unit goes to a left conveyor, or maybe another unit goes to a right conveyor? It's just simple things, maybe even a line layout, maybe not even a piece of a capital yet. So just tackle the things you can tackle first, and then look at long-term and how you're going to solve those moving forward. And it's helped a lot just by kind of isolating those low-hanging fruit items.
Great. Thank you, Greg. Steve or Kim, anything to add to that? Steve, you're muted.
Kim, do you want to go?
Sure, I'll just go quick. We've certainly been looking at automation and using more cobots, and I guess we're in an interesting space where we don't have, the labor that we did have 10 years ago. So we have much less opportunity, and we see that becoming less and less in the years coming. So we are looking, seriously looking at how we can add automation, but add it in a way that it can be highly flexible and quick and not require a whole bunch of additional, high skill to operate it. So really looking at how do we put it in, maintain the costs, but drive up efficiency and help the people to do the tasks that are most difficult.
Is it fair to say it's more evolutionary than revolutionary on the automation side?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a great question that you pose. And I would say that one thing that I think positively is going to come out of COVID's impact for the co-packaging industry is an acceleration of a trend that we've seen. We've had a lot of our CPG and food companies talk about that while they need co-packers that can scale, at the same time, they need small production runs for being fast to market for testing. And we call that the 10,000 to 10 million, having a footprint that's a great mix of a technology infrastructure that's got the flexibility to handle both ends of the spectrum, which Nulogy does amazingly, but also having a really good balance and understanding when to go slow and when to go fast with automation and machinery versus human touches. And I think a couple things have accelerated this need. One is, I call it the Amazonian effect. With more direct-to-consumer and e-commerce, there's a bigger assortment, there's a bigger choice, there's a lot more freshness to assortments across categories. And so the CPG companies are realizing that they've got to have a faster test environment, quick test, fast fail, fast learning. And this is what COVID's accelerating, because we're seeing a rapid movement to e-commerce solutions, and they're going to put even more pressure on brick and mortar retails. I give you an example of this. On the one end, we've got a retailer who needs us to move about 3 million units in about 8 weeks because they had inbound product for retail that was going to go to stores, and it was not configured in packaging for retail or for e-commerce. The stores aren't opening anytime soon in a material way, but their online sales are through the roof. And so we really don't have an automated system to touch that, to get that done in 4 to 5 weeks. And so we're putting people at it, and it's working incredibly well. Flip side, we had another client who's doing anti-bac material where they needed packaged in sets of 4, 5, and 10. And we were able to retrofit, because we maintain a staff of engineers, and we call it the Willy Wonka playground. They go back and have fun. We love when clients give us a challenge. They retrofitted some automation machinery we have for sealing, and we're able to adjust for their bags to ultimately be able to auto seal all of their bags. We're able to produce 500,000 sealed bags a week for this client, and it's just been a home run for them. So I think that do you have a culture that can move quickly? Do you have a culture that appreciates the use of automation? And can you find that balance? But I think it's going to be in a rapidly developing trend, that with e-commerce growing, with the threat of COVID out there continuing, I think it's going to be a great opportunity for co-packers to step into. And principally, one of the strategies we're always using on this front is we always want to bring back to our clients year-over-year cost improvements. And it's hard to do that in just a pure labor environment. And so you really need to think about how to use technology to drive that. So typically we see an evolution of get it really well with human touch, and then complement it and really grow it and evolve it with technology and automation to drive more efficiencies and ultimately take costs down so that we can surprise and delight our customers. So I'm excited about the landscape, because I think that it really sets us up to go to the next gen as co-packers, to be a greater solution for our partners in helping better quality, better sustainability, better cost, using partners like Nulogy and using technology.
Thank you, Steve. And I'm going to repeat and paraphrase, maybe in my words, a bunch of things you said there, because when we spoke, they're quite eye-opening for me. With retailers having less foot traffic these days, there's certain assumptions that, you know what, those display builds and unique SKUs might be less, on top of things like the sports season being canceled, the Olympics being canceled. But what you shared with me is, these CPGs are now experimenting much quicker, right? So there's a lot more stuff that's being done. And I venture to say that the customization for the end consumer might be greater if we end up going more down our e-com route. So while from the surface, it might look like longer runs, simpler SKUs, in reality, it might be very much the opposite. There's been a bit of a catalyst for that. So thanks, Steve, for that insight. Great. Just wanted to let everyone know we're about 10 minutes to close. I haven't seen any questions in the chat. So if someone is listening in and curious and wants to have a question posed, please pose it in the chat. I got a couple more questions on my end, but I want to make sure your voices are heard as well. Coming back to the panel, very general question here. How's the supply chain space evolving to kind of serve this new normal? Steve, you touched on a few things there, so maybe I'll put this to Kim and Greg, not just within your four walls, but all the way to the consumer experience. Kim or Greg, do one of you want to answer?
Sure, I can go first, if that's okay. So I think we are seeing, consumers are thinking more about needs versus wants, and I think that's going to have a big impact on, once retailers start to open up again. But the interesting thing is less retail time and more online time, more e-commerce codes. I think we're already seeing, where short runs are going to be something that we're going to have to continue not only dealing with, but also learning how to do them more efficiently. And we always look at them as sort of the end of the run. We'll do these short little runs, but I think we're just going to end up with more and more short runs to make a large run. So it's the, can we as co-packers do it as efficiently as possible and, still serve our customers' needs and know that, what they asked for yesterday will probably be different tomorrow, because it's just, things are changing so quickly. So we're just seeing a lot of shifts and changes and a lot of repacking, right? As the CPGs have things in formats that nobody wants, we end up repacking them and making them into something that is much needed. So I think that whole thing is going to just continue to evolve and to get bigger. And I think it's going to open up a lot of space in the co-packing world, and we are going to have to figure out how to do it faster, better, and like Steve said, show our customer how we can actually save them money as opposed to costing them more, and do it in this environment where everybody seems to be increasing their price, and we're trying to hold our own in a highly volatile space.
Yeah. Thanks, Kim. And when you talk about repacking, my mind wanders this regularly. Knowing how much effort CPGs put into big events like the Olympics, every time I think about repacking, I think of the gargantuan effort that went on behind the scenes by people like you and all of you to take these SKUs that were Olympics 2020 prepped and then to repurpose them for something else. So thanks for that. Greg, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I think, to that technology point a little bit, yeah, we're trying to, if not decrease cost to our customers, we're trying to maintain costs. I think it's not only, maybe it's not always towards the saving money, it's just maintaining costs. So to Kim's point is, so many people are having to increase costs because of increase in labor and operating expenses and everything else. That technology is just going to kind of help us stay the course and stay where we are. And sometimes that's a win. Sometimes in different areas, it's not. And we need to decrease costs. We need to get better. We need to get more efficient so you can focus in those areas. I think also to Kim's point, the short runs are going to be a way of life for the next 12 months. I think from a supply chain standpoint, though, I think our customers have realized that they need to do a little bit better job of managing the raw materials that they send to us for repacking or bundling or anything that's focused around the e-com world. They need to keep us in a little bit more of a safety stock situation, so that when something, or if something like this ever comes up again, we're able to react a little bit faster. Because our biggest hurdle about 5 days into the whole process was the fact we couldn't get their materials to us fast enough. So not only with the raw material side of that, we look at how much safety stock do we want to keep in the e-com configuration. so that we do have multiple SKUs, different variations, different colors of, X, Y, and Z. How do we keep a little more finished goods as a safety stock to make sure that we don't run out of anything? So I think they're kind of adjusting in looking at what those safety stock numbers look like from not only raw material, but also from a finished goods standpoint, because then it allows us to react faster, be a little bit more nimble, and then maybe it isn't such a short run. Maybe instead of, like Steve said, from the 10,000 to 10 million, maybe the short runs are 500. Well, maybe if we have the stock on hand, we can run 1,000, and then I don't have to set up that machine twice, or, line clearances, batch records, things of that sort. So all of those things take time, and that takes away from output. So stock in the supply chain, not only for what we're doing, but from our customers, is extremely important. If we don't, I can't build anything that we don't have stock for. So that's not only from the product side, but also from our suppliers, corrugated, plastic, bags, and then even just basic shippers. If our suppliers can't operate, we can't build anything. So I think it's just a whole combination of all of those pieces being kind of linked together, and making sure that not only we're prepared, but our customers and our suppliers are prepared. And if we can help in anything that we're doing and give them direction on how to do that, or vice versa, where we figure out how they did it well and implement it within our four walls, even better. Then it's more of a collaborative team effort.
Yeah, I think Greg's making an outstanding point, and it really triggered for me back to a question you asked, Maren. I think probably when we think about systematically, one of the biggest challenges we would have of another situation like that is looking at the impending shortage we have of trucks on the road. We were finding that there wasn't a problem getting stuff through the building. It was getting stuff picked up. And a lot of it was, we've already got, I think, in certain transportation lane challenges with sufficient trucks on the road. And that's, I think, something that the government ultimately needs to take a look at is the infrastructure and the legislation around that, the regulatory environment, to see how do we encourage a more robust environment for transportation, because I think that's where we saw the biggest pressure. Great example was this week alone, as businesses are still starting to turn back on. We had over 500 pallets ready to move for a client who wanted them, but they couldn't secure carriers, even though we were willing to be open on Saturday because there was a shortage. And that wasn't just a Saturday issue. We've seen that as kind of a theme over the last 3 to 4 months. I don't know if Greg or Kim have seen the same thing, but that would be one that I would love to see the state and federal government take a harder look at, and how to encourage that as availability in a situation like this.
Yeah, the longer hauls seem to be more of an issue. Finding longer haul carriers, obviously local or within a region are much easier, but we've seen a little bit of the long haul shortage where people just don't want to be on the road for that long.
Thank you to everyone on those comments. I think it ties back to the stuff we talked about earlier, which is around the resilience and efficiency, right? Everything has been designed to be just in time, minimize stock, minimize waste, but now we're talking about, all right, we need some more resiliency, whether it's on the carrier side or on the materials and customer product side. We only have a few minutes left, so what I'll do now is, because there's no questions, any closing thoughts? Kim, maybe we can start with you before I hand it back to our organizers.
I guess just one of the things from our side that we are seeing a real need for, and that's to give the feedback to our different levels of government about their communication and their in Canada, there was just, they've just confused everybody and thrown programs at people and made it so that people don't want to work and don't have to work, or think initially that they don't have to work. So we're seeing as a manufacturer and a co-packer that we are need to use our voice to share with the governments what worked and what didn't from their side, because in Canada they caused a lot of problems for essential workers. And the only other thing I wanted to add was I thought the points from Greg and Steve were great around the trucking industry, and those folks really need a hand. They've been trucking throughout, and we closed in Canada, we closed all the washrooms on them and we closed everything, so they couldn't even get a coffee. And it was, I think they really need to be celebrated. And some of those posters for thanking frontline workers should be including the truckers, because without them, people wouldn't have had anything on their shelves. So, you know, they did an amazing job and should be celebrated.
Absolutely, yeah. Without, we worry about being away from our families for a week on end. They have to do it much longer, right? So, and the risk they put them in, and the support, like you said. I hadn't thought about the fact that no rest stops would be open to go to washrooms along the way on a long haul, but that's 100% true. Yeah. Steve, anything else for you to close?
Yeah, for our friends in the industry, I would say, you know, when you look at the CPA report that comes out every year, it regularly demonstrates that more than 50% of the industry is a single site owner that's a co-packer. And it's easy to be focused on the 5 feet in front of you every day, winning new business, keeping current customers happy, keeping the production running efficiently. And I think oftentimes small businesses like that don't take the time to step back and say, what if? You know, what if this were to happen? How would we be prepared? How would we engage our customer? And even as I said earlier, picking the brains of your customers and your partners in the industry, that ounce of preparation can really pay off. And the reason I say that is I had more than one of our major clients call us up and say, are you ready to take more on? Because we've moved away from another co-packer in the country because they didn't have control over COVID. The plant was shut down. There wasn't quality in what they did. And it was a lost permanent business. And too many people are working hard to build these businesses up to watch them get crashed in a day. So my advice would be really take this as an opportunity to pause and ask yourself, are you and your team taking the time to really think about and be prepared for some of these things to the best you can, so that when these things do happen, they're not global killers for your business, because you're not able to be flexible and react in a way that protects you, protects your team, protects your community, and protects your client.
Great. Thanks for that advice, Steve. Greg, anything else from you?
Sure. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is I think it comes back to mainly communication. And I think that's, to Kim's point, it's through the government to the small business community to the healthcare industry. But then it's also communication between ownership and employees, and conveying what our direction is, what our solutions are to the problem, what direction we're heading, how are we going to protect them. And also just basically, you know, we're a family-owned business. We have a family culture. They are family. Without them, we don't do anything. So I can't run 10,000 units by myself. Not one person on the line can do it by themselves. So knowing that they have a safe workplace to come to each and every day so that they can take care of their family is a huge win for us and for them. And so making sure they know, if you are uncomfortable, if you do not want to be at the office, if you need to take a couple days to make sure your family is well taken care of, go do that. You know, and that's really a policy we've had before COVID. If there's family issue, family comes first. Go take care of what you need to take care of, and then come back and we'll be here waiting for you. I think giving that sense of not being forced to do anything, or if they don't come in, they're going to lose their job to another employee. I think that goes a long way in how you build that family culture and the stability of the company moving forward, whether it's during a pandemic or whether it's a Monday in December. Doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Just make sure they have a good, safe place to come to work.
Thanks for that, Greg. And like you said, you guys have always been like that, but I think during this time, how we treat our team members and our colleagues and our staff will be remembered when we come out of the pandemic as well, right? So it's very important, obviously, to keep those who've supported us throughout supported in return. So thank you, Greg. Good closing words. Thank you to the panelists, Greg, Steve, and Kim, for joining. I'm going to hand it back to Dawn from F4SS to close, hopefully right on time.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. Interesting. You know, we did talk about transportation and logistics. We had a couple of speakers a few forums back here, maybe a month or so ago, talking about that very issue. And they did share some resources with us on how you can help your truckers, pointing out the things you said. Their rest stops aren't available any longer. You know, aside from their normal challenges, now you have these additional challenges. So great awareness to address that important part of the supply chain, and we appreciate that. We want to thank our moderator and our panelists for doing a great job sharing a lot of good information. We appreciate you making the time for us today. We want to share our partner, Ron Puvek, and the CPA. We will send additional information. Nulogy has given us some additional information to send out on this topic that we'll be sharing with all of our registrants today. This will be recorded and put on our website as we talked about, and I'll be sharing it with Nulogy and CPA as well. So you could contact any of us for more information. So thanks everyone, and I hope you have a great, productive, and safe day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.